special for you on College Pressbox today. We'll talk UT Texas Tech, recap the Baylor versus Oklahoma State game, and take a look around college football. Keep it here. It's a College Pressbox football special. Welcome to College Pressbox Football Special. I'm Melissa Killebrew, and with me tonight I have Pressbox team of analysts, Reese Miller, and Peter Swindoria, and Jeff Barker. How's it going tonight, guys?
Great, thanks for having us.
Great, and happy birthday, Alyssa.
Thank you. So Texas didn't have a game this weekend, but there was a huge Big 12 matchup again this weekend in the Baylor-Oklahoma State game. The Cowboys dominated number 4 Baylor across the board, winning the game 49-17 to take control of the Big 12 conference. What did this blowout loss reveal about Baylor? Jeff, let's start with you.
Well, Alyssa, I think what we saw in this game here was that Baylor is seriously overrated. When you play teams like Wofford, Buffalo, Louisiana Monroe in your preseason schedule, I think it shows that you come into conference play, you still haven't played anyone. Finally, play a good team like Oklahoma State. Before this, Oklahoma was the only good team they played. I think we just learned that Baylor wasn't who we thought they were. They're a beatable team. Petty kind of showed that he's maybe not the Heisman candidate that we thought he was. Their defense was not as good as we thought they were either. So I think that's what we learned from this game about Baylor.
Okay, Reese, how about you?
I still think Baylor's a very strong team, and I don't want to say they were ranked too high because they had an excellent resume going to that point. But even in this game, they had a chance to seize momentum early on. Bryce Petty tripped at the 1-yard line. 2 plays later, Shock Linwood fumbled. I think that was a big turning point in the game, and a fumble later by Bryce Petty really put that one away. For me, it's just really playing a tough team in Stillwater, and Oklahoma State really doing everything they had to do to take care of business at home, and they now control their path to the Big 12 championship.
I agree with you, Reese. I think that this was a very good Baylor team. They ran into an Oklahoma State team that's really playing out of their minds right now. We saw it against Texas, and then we saw it again against Baylor. Keep in mind that this is the same Baylor team that led the nation in scoring through the first 10 weeks and was ranked 7th in defense. This is a very balanced team, has a lot of playmakers. We see teams get upset all the time. I think what we saw in this game is the fact that Baylor can be stopped if you can take away the big plays. Their offense might not be as fluid as we thought it was. They rely a lot on big plays. Oklahoma State was able to take that out of their game plan. I think that was really the big thing for them.
And it was the first top 10 defense the Bears had played all year. Really the top close to the one of the better defenses in the NCAA, and OSU has top 10 rankings all the way down the list, and I think that really showed, only giving up 17 points to the Bears on Saturday.
Sure. Not a ton of offenses have done much against Oklahoma State. I thought Baylor would do a little bit better, but when they got behind, it was bad news for the Bears.
All right, do you guys expect number 7 Oklahoma to defeat OU in their last game of the season and clinch the conference as well as a BCS Bowl for the second time in 3 years? Reese, let's start with you.
I certainly do. The way they played against Texas, going on the road to DKR, absolutely dominating that game, and then coming back home and everyone's on the Bears bandwagon thinking they're going to make a BCS, maybe a national championship run, and Oklahoma State dominated all 3 phases of the game, running the ball, throwing the ball. Clint Shelf was unreal in that game, 19 out of 25, 3 scores, 370 yards, just so efficient in that game, and I think they'll absolutely take care of an Oklahoma team who struggle with some of the lesser teams in the Big 12 conference. They're playing that game at home, and I expect them to roll OU on the way to a Big 12 title and a BCS berth.
Right, and Oklahoma does not have the offense that we're used to seeing. Of course, we saw it pretty close to here in Dallas whenever they played Texas. They've struggled on offense, quite frankly. They haven't been able to air it out. And Oklahoma State has not had a question on defense all year. They've showed that recently. This is a very good defensive unit, a top 20 defensive unit in the nation. The question for Oklahoma State was their offense. They've really come into their own lately. Clint Shelf is a legitimate college quarterback. He's been putting up big numbers, and now they get returner and wide receiver Josh Stewart back. He's a huge weapon. That really makes Oklahoma State that much better. They should be the heavy favorite playing OU in Stillwater with the Big 12 title on the line.
All right, Jeff, how about you?
Yeah, I'm going to agree with Reese and Peter here. Definitely think that Oklahoma State is going to be able to beat OU to finish off the Big 12 and to go to a BCS game. And when you look at it, they mentioned Shelf. He's playing unbelievable right now. And a lot of times college football, it just comes down to who's hot at the right times. And right now, Oklahoma State is hot at the right time. I mean, they have one more game, and they can clinch that Big 12, and I see them doing it.
All right, now let's talk a bit about Texas's upcoming game against Texas Tech. The Longhorns need a win to keep their Big 12 hopes alive, so Thanksgiving's matchup will be a must-win. What do Longhorns have to do to bounce back after their 38-13 loss to Oklahoma State? Peter, how about you?
Oh, well, I think that it's going to be important for them to run the ball a little bit better. They only averaged 3.5 yards per carry. Malcolm Brown, as the feature back, only averaged 2.9 yards per carry. When Jonathan Gray went down, I mean, that was a lot of offense. That was a player that was gaining a lot of yardage on early downs for them. If they can get 4 or 5 yards on first and second down, it makes third and manageable a possibility for Texas. That opens up a lot of stuff in the passing game because that allows Case McCoy to be able to throw. And really, I mean, it opens up a lot more on offense as well because they can run the ball in those situations too. So if they're able to get that running game better and limit their turnovers, this Texas team could have a much better showing on offense against Texas Tech.
I think when you look at Texas Tech, started 7-0, got all the way up to number 10 in the BCS standings. They dropped 4 in a row, giving up about 250 rush yards per game in that span. I think Texas really has to take advantage of this and really keep Baker Mayfield or Davis Webb. They haven't announced the official starter yet. Eric Ward, Jason Morrow. Keep these guys off the field because if this turns into a shootout, Texas could be in trouble. Their secondary has been a little suspect, so I also think they need to get some major presence and pressure from that defensive line that we didn't see in the Oklahoma State game and really pressure the Texas Tech quarterbacks.
Okay. Jeff, how about you?
Yeah, I'm going to focus on the defense here, going off what Reese said. The Texas defensive line was not able to get a single sack on Clint Shelf last week, or when they played a couple weeks ago in the Oklahoma State game. So I'm going to look for Jackson Jeffcoat, Cedric Reed, two of the best defensive linemen in the Big 12, to get some pressure on Baker Mayfield and that Texas Tech offense. And also as well, look for those linebackers. I think they need to step up, particularly Steve Edman and Dalton Santos. They're going to need to step up in coverage. We already know that with the number one passing offense for Texas Tech, this Texas secondary is going to have their work cut out for them, but they're going to need some help from the linebackers as well.
All right. Texas Tech leads the nation in averaging more than 400 passing yards per game. How can the Longhorns limit the Red Raiders' passing attack? Jeff, let's start with you on this one.
I just mentioned, I think they're just going to have to really get pressure on Baker Mayfield. They can't give him time. I mean, if they give him too much time, he's going to pick them apart. Texas Tech likes to come out, in their spread formations. They like to spread the field out with their receivers. And Texas mainly, they need to limit the big play is what I think.
All right, how about Reese?
I think we mentioned it a little bit. One of the main things is getting pressure on Baker Mayfield, the Texas Tech quarterback, to really limit the down-the-field throws and the big plays because they have an outstanding receiving core, and they'll throw the ball all around the yard. They're not going to try to fool you doing any sort of power run game. I think one of the biggest things is keeping the ball out of that offensive hands through the offense running the football.
Okay.
Right, and as Mac Brown said today, this is an offense that's pretty simple. They use only a couple of concepts. They're just going to be better than you at executing these concepts. And I think that it's going to be up to the Longhorns to know exactly what Texas Tech is doing. They may have to double cover out there if that's what it takes. They're going to have to get the secondary playing well. Like you guys said, it definitely starts up front. Texas had 24 sacks in their 6-game winning streak, 0 last week against Oklahoma State. I think they're going to need to bring down Baker Mayfield a couple times if they're going to win this game.
Right. Okay. Now, let's hear what Mac Brown said about Thanksgiving game at his press conference this morning.
It looks like the same offense. I go back to 2002 when Cliff beat us 42-38 right in the end. Or all those teams that Mike had where they come in and they just throw it and they throw it and they throw it. And you have to learn that you better have some fresh legs rushing the passer at the end of the game because they're, like I said, they may throw it 75 times. They don't care. They may go. I remember out here Mike went for 14 fourth downs, I think, one night. One of them was on his own 30. It was a 4th and 5, and I thought, nah, and he did and made it. So that's just who they are. They're risk takers. They are gunslingers. It fits Tech so well, and what Cliff's doing is what we've become to know at Texas Tech. I think he's a perfect fit for them, and he's got a great young staff, and those guys will do a good job.
For the upcoming Texas and Texas Tech game, stay tuned. It's College Pressbox. Welcome back. Now let's shift from the Big 12 to the SEC. Number 1 Alabama travels to number 4 Auburn in the Iron Bowl this weekend for their last regular season game of the season. How much of a threat do the Tigers pose to the Tide's title hopes? Reese, let's start with you.
I think it's a huge threat. Auburn, since losing to LSU, has absolutely taken the world on fire in huge comeback wins over Georgia and Texas A&M on the road. This team has actually the second top leading rushing attack in the nation. Gus Malzahn has these guys playing out of their minds, especially with that no-huddle offense. Nick Marshall's doing some nice things also. And a little bit of an underrated defense. I think it's going to be an excellent game this weekend.
I agree.
I think that Alabama still pulls it out. They have the top-ranked defense, and especially they have one of the best run defenses in the nation. Now, of course, Auburn's offense revolves around the run, whether that's Trey Mason or Nick Marshall at quarterback. And what I've kind of noticed about this Auburn offense is there's not a lot of big plays. What they like to do is run the ball a lot, get 5 yards, move the chains. And I think that kind of bodes well for Alabama because they get a lot of tackles in the backfield. I do think that Auburn is going to be the toughest team that Alabama has faced this year, but I still think that Alabama pulls it out and gets a trip to the SEC championship game.
All right, Jeff, how about you?
I'm going to agree with Peter here. I think Alabama definitely pulls it out, but Auburn can easily win, or not easily, but they have a good chance of winning this game. I mean, it's going to be on their home field. They're coming off that win against Georgia where they broke the hearts of Aaron Murray and the Georgia faithful with that huge play where Ricardo Louis caught the tipped pass. They're going to be coming with some huge momentum, and they know that this win would give them a shot to get to the national championship. I mean, it would potentially give them a shot to leapfrog Ohio State in there for that 2 spot. So I definitely think there's going to be a lot to play for here. It's a rivalry game. The Iron Bowl, whether both teams are winless or both teams are undefeated, this is always a huge game. So I never count Auburn out.
And the last 4 winners of the Iron Bowl have actually been your national champions,
That is true.
dating back for 4 years in a row. So I think this is big, and it may be number 5 here in a row.
It'll definitely be a good game, that's for sure. All right, Ohio State is set to play Michigan State in the Big Ten championship game. What do you guys think Ohio State's chances are of making it to the BCS championship game?
Well, I think that Ohio State's chances go as far as whether Alabama wins or loses. I don't think that they're going to be able to make enough of a push to pass Florida State or Alabama. So should Auburn win or should Alabama lose in the conference championship game, then Ohio State's in because they're not going to lose to Michigan State. That said, they haven't really played too tough of opponents, and I don't think that they would be as worthy of an opponent to be in the BCS championship game. Braxton Miller is a great player, but I don't think he's Jameis Winston or A.J. McCarron, and I think that that's what we're going to end up seeing.
There's a lot to love about Ohio State, especially on offense with Carlos Hyde and Braxton Miller. I mean, these guys have put together a phenomenal season. 2 straight undefeated seasons they're looking at. I do think Michigan State gives them a little bit of trouble with that outstanding defense, but I do think they move on and win the Big Ten, although they're not going to have enough power in the polls to leapfrog Florida State or Alabama without a little help.
Right. Jeff, how about you?
I'm going to agree with these guys. I think, unfortunately for Ohio State, I think they finished undefeated. They beat Michigan, and then they go on to win the Big Ten championship. And then I think from there you just see Alabama stays undefeated. I think Florida State stays undefeated. And the strength of schedule, Ohio State's best wins are Wisconsin and Northwestern. So I don't think that's going to be enough to allow them to leapfrog Florida State.
All right. Well, USC is 6-0 in conference play since Ed Orgeron took over for Lane Kiffin as head coach. Is Orgeron the long-term answer at head coach for the Trojans? Jeff, let's start with you.
Alyssa, I don't think Ed Orgeron is a long-term coach here. You see a lot of times the interim head coach comes in and the guys rally behind him, mainly because there was sort of a conflict with the other coach. So I think right now you're seeing USC play really well. And I think they'd be playing really well for anyone that wasn't Lane Kiffin at this point. Ed Orgeron, he's been with the program. He has a history with them. He's won Rose Bowls, won championships with them. He's been a recruiting coordinator and defensive line coach there since 2010. But his head coaching tenure with Mississippi, not so great. From 2005 to 2007, he pretty much just ruined that program. They're still building back up from that. So I think you're going to see USC go after a big-time head coach. They're going to throw some money, I think, at Sumlin. Maybe you'll see Broncos defensive coordinator Jack Del Rio. He played at USC. He's coached there a little bit as well. So I think you're going to see him do that and then try and keep Orgeron because he's a great recruiter and a great defensive line coach. But I don't think he's a long-term fix for the head coaching spot.
All right. Reese, how about you?
I'm going to agree with Jeff here 100%. I think a lot of times we see sort of these interim head coaches come in and set the world on fire. You saw it with the Dallas Cowboys, Jason Garrett a few years ago. Since then, it's been absolute mediocrity. And I'm afraid that might happen to USC if they settle with Coach O. We saw an under 500 record every year he was a head coach at Ole Miss. And I think, unfortunately, that might be the case for USC if they stick with Coach O. I think they bring in Coach Sumlin, maybe even Mike Tomlin for a job from the NFL. A couple of those big-time names for the USC job, I don't think they take from an in-staff.
Well, Orgeron's done everything he needed to do to keep that job. They're 6-0 in conference play. But I have to agree with you guys as well. I don't think that he is the long-term answer, and that's just because we're talking about USC. We're talking about a top-5 program. They have all the resources. They can have just about any coach they want aside from a couple of guys. And quite frankly, I think it's going to be up to them to decide who they ultimately want. It's probably not going to be a coach that went 10-25 at Ole Miss. He's done great so far, but I think just because USC has the advantage of being able to pick whoever they want, I think that's exactly what they're going to do.
All right. Well, now on to the Heisman Watch. What are you guys' top 3 Heisman Trophy candidates? Reese, let's start with you.
In order, I'm going to go Jameis Winston, number 1. This guy has been absolutely on fire. 32 touchdowns, I believe, only 7 interceptions. He's been absolutely phenomenal, throwing for almost 70% completion. Number 2, I'm actually going to have A.J. McCarron. This guy's thrown 23 touchdowns, about 68% completion, and this guy's already led his team to 2 national championships, trying to go on the way to number 3. And that's simply, I have him 2 because Marcus Mariota has fallen out of the discussion. I believe Johnny Manziel unfortunately played his way out of the discussion with a couple of costly turnovers this weekend and 3 losses on the team. Bryce Petty sort of was working his way in there. Once again, didn't come up big in a really clutch game, possibly a Heisman moment. I think McCarron almost wins it by default if Jameis Winston has a fallout with some off-the-field issues.
All right.
Well, I agree with your picks that they should be in the top 3, but I don't agree with the order. I have McCarron 3rd. He's done a lot. He's well on his way to a 3rd national championship. I think that he is a very big part of that team, but I think also that offensive line, that defense, and that running game help him quite a bit. Number 2, I'm going with Jameis Winston. I know he's the favorite, and I know he's helped revitalize this Florida State program, but let's not forget they're number 2 in the nation in defense, and they were very successful with a similar roster last year with E.J. Manuel. And that's why my number 1, while it might not be the popular pick, I'm going with Johnny Manziel. He has the highest completion percentage, he has the highest yardage, he has the most touchdowns, and I think Johnny Manziel does the most for his team. This is an A&M team with a terrible defense. I mean, one of the worst defenses I've ever seen for a ranked team. And I think the fact that he has them in the discussion to be in a reasonable bowl for the SEC and having won 7 games already, I think he should be the favorite to win it once again. This is about the most extraordinary player. He has the best stats, also has by far the most rushing yards of any of these quarterbacks. I think he should win it.
I think he has a little bit too many turnovers, just saying for a Heisman contender. I think he does put the team on his back and maybe means the most to his team. Instead of a Florida State or Alabama, because their defenses are so solid. Maybe they could plug somebody else in, but I don't think this is his year after 3 losses.
But what we've kind of seen lately is you don't have to be an undefeated team to get it. RG3 had 3 losses. Manziel had 2 last year. I think Manziel has the best stats.
All right, Jeff, how about you?
Yeah, guys, I'm going to go with Jameis Winston, number 1. Just the way his leadership has lifted this Florida State team essentially into the national championship, assuming they can win the Florida game and then win the ACC championship. I think it just hands down goes to him, assuming that he's not charged for the sexual assault that he's being investigated for right now. And if he is, I think, I agree with Reese here, by default, I think the Heisman Trophy then goes to A.J. McCarron, simply just because of character, for 1, and then 2, just for the body of work and just how incredible he's been in his entire career, and this season especially as well. And then I think number 3, I'm going to have Johnny Manziel there. Just, I mean, the stats say it all. You know, and Manziel, Reese, you mentioned that he kind of lost it in the LSU game this last weekend. But I think against Missouri this weekend, he has a chance for one more Heisman moment. You know, this game doesn't necessarily mean too much for them, but I think he has a chance if he puts up big numbers and he ruins Missouri's season. I think he has a chance if Jameis Winston is charged with a sexual assault.
Well, I would definitely have to agree with you, Jeff and Reese. So, who do you guys like to make it to the national championship game and win it all? Peter, let's start with you.
Well, I like Alabama and Florida State. I don't see any reason why either of these teams should lose. Alabama has the tougher road. Florida State will definitely be in there, but I think they both get in. I actually like Florida State to win it because Florida State is second in offense and second in defense. They're more balanced than Alabama. Alabama has a nice offense, but they're not a top 10 offense. The fact that they're ranked second in both categories makes them the most complete team in my eyes.
All right, Reese?
I'm going to agree with Peter almost 100% here. I think Alabama's a little bit down, even though they're absolutely, undefeated, doing everything they need to do. I think both teams make it to the national championship. I think Jameis Winston's complete his stellar year with the national championship back in Florida State.
All right, Jeff?
I'm going to agree with the same teams here, Alabama and Florida State. But I think Alabama's going to take it. They've been there before, and I think they're just going to be too much for Florida State. Jameis Winston, his first year as the starter, and McCarron is the experience. I think Winston, we discussed the Heisman candidates. I think Winston's the better player, but McCarron's been there before. Saban's been there before. This whole team's been there before. That defense is unbelievable, so I'm going with Alabama.
All right, well, before we go, I have to ask you guys, what are Texas's chances for pulling out a win in the upcoming game against Tech? Jeff, let's start with you.
I think Texas is definitely going to pull out the win here, and I think they're going to go into that Baylor game with, a slim chance to win the Big 12 title. Hoping that Oklahoma State loses to Oklahoma on December 7th, but I'm going to say Texas wins this one 35-28.
All right, Reese.
I think Texas does get it done on Thanksgiving night, bringing home a little turkey to that locker room. I think final score 28-24, barely pulling it out at the end. Longhorns win.
Yes, Texas Tech has lost 4 in a row, and 4 in a row against Texas as well. It's going to be a shootout, 38-31 Texas.
All right, well, that does it for our College Pressbox football special. Make sure to follow us on Twitter at College Pressbox and stay tuned for our basketball special. For Peter, Jeff, and Reese, I'm Melissa Killebrew. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, yeah.
You seriously think
And if they tryna doubt the South, that's fine. We riding dirty at the same time, shine.